Hello, how are you doing this week? We're doing okay. It's been a beautiful week. I wanted to touch base with you to just give you a heads up for Sunday's service. If you would, read 1 Corinthians 1, verses 18 through 25 to prepare yourself for worship. And as some of you may recall, we've been taking some of the symbols of our faith and looking at them as they speak to us through the Bible. We've looked at some interesting symbols of the cup, the bread, and this week we're going to look at the cross, which may be the most unique symbol in the Christian faith, and I dare say probably in all of world religion. The cross stands for who we are, and as Paul states it in several passages, but certainly in 1 Corinthians 1, to some it's foolishness to say, we want you to know who we are. We stand behind a cross. In our generation, the cross really does not relate as easily as it certainly did in the first century. We've come to know it to mean something good about Jesus, about his love. We wear a cross sometimes to remember him, or we spot a cross and it gives us hope and encouragement when we see it driving down the road or in some other place in the community. Back in Paul's day, it wasn't anything good. It was the worst thing you might understand about what could happen to you in this life. It was torture and persecution. It was injustice for those who were certainly in the Jewish faith, but for Christians as well in the early church. It meant a painful death. It meant weakness. To die on the cross meant that you had absolutely no power to change what happened to you. So I suspect that in the early church, they wrestled with this symbol a great deal. What is the power of the cross? What does it mean to say there is strength in the cross instead of weakness, instead of defeat? So we'll look together at that passage this Sunday. Out of those ideas, we'll talk a little bit about preaching the cross, and what I'm really saying is not so much about a sermon, but that the word that we share with others about our faith involves the cross of Jesus. And the cross, certainly one thing it shows us is how evil this world can be. We don't need the cross to tell us that, but it reinforces how horrible people can be to one another, how horribly we sin outside of what God would desire. For God's only Son to be put up on the cross like a criminal and to die that kind of death. It tells us how tough and bad things can be in the world. But we also talk about it, preach it, share it, because it tells us about what the commitment of the Christian life is. That if we are to follow Jesus, there are certain things we are to do. We are to take up our cross and follow, and that's not a literal thing. We're not carrying literal crosses. We're making sacrifices so that we might not be put into the mold of the world, but that we might be what Jesus wants us to be. The cross calls for sacrifice and commitment. And then it also tells us exactly who God is. That in this horrible, shameful death, God did not seek vengeance upon the evil people in the world who did this to Jesus. He sent salvation. He sent the opportunity for grace and for forgiveness. It tells us exactly who God is, and if we're ever confused about that, the cross points us back to a loving, forgiving, amazing God who even from the death of the cross resurrected his Son that we might have life. So I hope you think about that. Look around you this week. What symbols lie around us that can tell us a little bit more about our faith? The cross is only one of them, but there are many, and there are signs of hope and encouragement for us as we live out this life. I'll be praying for you this week, praying for safety in our community, praying for our time of gathering together for worship. If you're unable to come, you're still very much a part of what we're doing here. We understand the times. If you feel comfortable coming to church, we'll have the same precautions as we've been taking, and we hope to see you there. You have a good rest of the week.